Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3602. Today's date is September 20, 2025. It's been almost like a night at exactly 10 p.m. Alright, we just directly jump into the question. Let's go. Alright. The question is, what if DNA could be written like a computer code? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, yeah. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Okay, yeah. Why am I asking this question? What if questions are a kind of like a somebody very interested or very like a very like amazing, or it's really good to kind of like a talk about those particular, like basically what if question is kind of like a somebody uh, looking at a kind of like a same problem or scenario with a new perspective. And when we try to look at that, it's kind of like something really amazing. What if questions is actually determined by how much information that we have. So when I give the answer regarding about what if question, I try to kind of like a simply rememorize again those things, and yeah, it's really good. Okay, so let's just jump into the question. All right, now the question is very interesting, by the way. What if DNA could be rewritten like a computer code? Okay, first of all, let's just understand the question. What is exactly DNA? DNA is a dipoxic nucleic acid. Am I exactly right or not? I don't know. Like basically in the school, I kind of like a simply learn that thing. Okay. DNA is our building blocks. Okay. Now, what is exactly that? Okay. Um. Okay. So let's just say that key. Um. How do I supposed to say? Okay. Uh, are you a coder? Are you kind of like the person who write the code and things like that? Okay. Um, let me give you the context. Okay, probably. In coding point of perspective, but coding is a kind of like actually most of people will not gonna resonate that much. Okay. So how do I supposed to kind of like simply say? How do I supposed to? Lego. Yeah, let's take a Lego. Okay. You probably play Lego games. Okay, Lego kind of like a things and stuff like that. Okay. So while you are Lego, like basically Lego, you actually played now. Like it's a very common thing. Okay, you actually played Lego games. Okay, yeah. Lego games is a kind of like assembly. You build multiple bricks, attach with each other, and kind of like a create particular things. You can create anything, like from ship to plane to home to anything. You can just build the blocks and things like that. Okay, yeah. This is what kind of like a simply Lego game. Now these are kind of like a simply each brick are very essential factor for building the whatever the things that you wanted to build. Okay, yeah. So let me tell you one thing. If I wanted to make a house, a Lego house, then probably I need a kind of like a something a brick which is kind of like a something color of something brown. Okay, yeah. So that I would create the wall. Then I need a specific kind of like assembly brick which is kind of like assembly look like a window. Then I need a specific kind of like a brick which is kind of like assembly act as a roof and things like that, which is light and things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the function is kind of like a really same, like on those every blocks, every bricks has a kind of like a similar functionality. They attach on each other by this square stuff, like a circle stuff. Okay, you just put it, fix it and things like that. But the functionality and the appearance is kind of like a look very differently. I'm kind of like it's really very hard to explain and things like that. But still not the Lego blocks is not really kind of like a connect with that. So I'm gonna go through the computer code. Computer code is a kind of like a simply really kind of like a simply connect with that particular stuff. Okay, yeah. If you are not a kind of like a coder, if you are not really kind of like a associated with the computer science and things like that, and you didn't really write a code, still I try to figure it out. So still I try to kind of like explain that you might gonna understand much better. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing, a code means like that, a kind of like a software. Okay, yeah. uh, First of all, what is exactly that code? Why do we supposed to write the code? Okay, yeah. We write the code for kind of like assembly for the software. Now, what is exactly software do? Okay, yeah. So basically, what exactly is this thing? Okay, yeah. Why? Like, first of all, let's just ask couple of questions so that you might gonna understand much more better. Okay, yeah. So let me tell you one thing. Okay, I wanted to edit my video. Okay, yeah. How do I supposed to do that? How do I supposed to edit my video? I need a software, right? Yeah. Okay, so what is exactly software? What kind of like a software would gonna do? A software is a kind of like a some interface where it would communicate with user with hardware. Okay, what is exactly that? What is exactly user and what is exactly hardware? A user means like me. I am using that particular software to make a kind of like a you make a kind of like a video. Okay, yeah. Connect with the hardware means like that key whatever the work that I do, it really required some sort of power, and that power comes from hardware like a processor, RAM, graphics driver, okay, or GPU, right? So I need like basically what does do is that the software is actually connect with the user to to the hardware, to the hardware of the machine. Okay, yeah. And how does it connect? It connect by code. Like basically is this thing, it kind of like somebody written such a code so that it would kind of like somebody connect with the hardware, and whatever the user command, it that command will transmit signal to the hardware will do gonna process, and when the process actually happen, my video will be done. I will gonna edit my video. So basically is this thing, coding is a kind of like a some communication between user to the hardware and make things work done. Okay, yeah. Do you understand? A simple example. Alright, yeah. Now is that thing that key, let's just understand even more simple way. Let's just say that key I wanted to export my video. Export means like that extract, like a come out. Okay, yeah, like basically I edit my video. Okay, yeah. Now what I do is that yeah, I need to export my video, like come out and things like that. Okay, I need to upload that video now. So basically what I do is that okay, I click the export. Okay, then when I click the export, what exactly happened? The software I'm using, the Premiere Pro software. So Premiere Pro is actually combine all the clips that you edited. Okay, yeah, and kind of like a simply try to render. Now what is actually render? A render means like that ki it compile everything, every clips that you edit with the music, with sound effects, with everything. Okay, yeah, compile everything, and after the compile, it kind of like a somebody process, it render, it kind of like a make a video of that particular clip. Okay, and for that particular thing, it really required a kind of like a simply a processor, a kind of like a graphics processor, because the video is a kind of like a graphics, it's not a text document, it's a kind of like a simply a pixel format thing. Okay, yeah. So basically it's a graphics. Okay, so basically for the exporting, it really required hardware power, it really required a kind of like a something a graphics processing unit, GPU. So basically when I put the command as a export, what does that software do? Software will kind of like a somebody connect with the hardware, whatever the clips that it kind of like a done, it compile all those clips and kind of like a send it to the render, and the GPU will render entire everything, every clips that you edit, and make it a one single video. And it kind of like a export entirely from 1 to 100%, and after that thing it will gonna show you the video will be exported, it will gonna locate it on this location, and you actually open that location, the video is completely done with a full resolution, with kind of like a some higher quality, with kind of like a something compile everything. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a software does. Software is actually connect with the user to the hardware of the machine, and this is actually happened by coding. Okay, yeah. Now what is exactly the code? What exactly is this thing? How this is actually happening? This actually happen is because of kind of like a something a code is connect with a kind of like a something hardware. Okay, yeah. it's very difficult to understand. Okay, if you're not kind of like a somebody very scientific or tech background, it's still kind of like a bit difficult for me to explain this thing as well. Okay, yeah. But let's just understand the code is really essential. Okay, the important point that you have to understand, the code is connect with kind of like a something hardware to software. Okay, now sometimes when I use my software, when I use my Premiere Pro get crash or kind of like a bug, or kind of like a sometimes that software does not really work properly. How this is actually happened? Well, something actually happened because of this software is kind of like not really working. So I kind of like a somebody shut down my system and kind of like restart my system and kind of like a try again. When I try again, the kind of like a somebody software, it still freeze, it's still kind of like a lag or things like that. So I'm not really sure what is actually happened. So what I do, I call that particular kind of like a somebody person who is a kind of like an advisor or kind of like a service center, and says that I'm actually using your software, Adobe Premiere Pro software, and it kind of like a crash a lot. So basically the advisor, the customer service gonna say that, sir, you have to update your software. So how do I supposed to update? Like basically we actually giving you the link, click that link, download the software and install that software. It is the updated version of the Premiere Pro. Okay, so I went to the link, download and install that thing. Now Premiere Pro work really best, right? So my problem is actually solved, right? Yeah, but how this actually problem actually solved? Like what exactly is this thing? I just installed the kind of like a newer version of Premiere Pro, newer version of kind of like a video editing software. But how this actually happened? Like how this thing? Like basically the new version is a kind of like a somebody correct all the kind of like a somebody problem that occurred in previous version. Now what is exactly that? Okay, it means that let me tell you one thing. As I mentioned, every software is kind of like a something made by code. It connect with the hardware. Okay, yeah. Now sometimes the code is not relevant, or maybe the code is not the function the way that it should supposed to be, or sometimes the system hardware is not functioning properly. So there is a lot of kind of like a something stuff happen. Okay, yeah. I'm gonna give you example. Okay, yeah. So let's just say that like basically just think that my mother asked me to kind of like a somebody bring some sort of groceries from store. Okay, yeah. Now like imagine that my mother is a user and she actually give me command that I have to bring some sort of grocery from storeroom, from supermarket or things like that. So basically I am the software. Okay, let's just say I am the software. Okay, yeah. Now software is kind of like a made up by code and things like that. So basically I am a code of software, just one thing. Okay, yeah. Now what is actually my job? My job is to go to the supermarket and buy the grocery. Okay, so I went to the supermarket, but supermarket is closed or maybe not open or something like that. So because of this is not open, then how do I supposed to bring groceries? How do I supposed to buy groceries? I can't buy groceries. So basically I came home and I tell my mother that ki supermarket is closed. Okay, yeah. Now this is what kind of like a simple command is actually happened. What is actually it means that when I put the command as a export the video, okay, software actually connect with the hardware same as I went to the supermarket. But sometimes hardware is not responding well, or supermarket is a kind of like a close. Then what is actually happened that it is my responsibility to tell the user that the hardware is not responding well, or I have to be tell my mother that the grocery store or supermarket is closed, right? Yeah. But when I try to do this thing, I can't, because my functionality to kind of like a bring the grocery back home, my functionality is to kind of like a render my video that user my command. So basically is this thing, how do I supposed to go back empty handed, right? how do I supposed to go back empty handed? So this is what kind of like assembly I get freeze, that I don't know what should I supposed to do. I have to go back and kind of like assembly go back and tell them, but still my functionality is a kind of like assembly wrong, because my functionality is that key, my user is actually giving me command that key bring groceries to home. Okay, yeah, and I am not doing it that, so basically I'm stuck at this particular position. Same thing happened with the computer too. Like a computer is kind of like a software is also kind of like a hang in that particular position, that my user is actually give the command that he render this particular video from the GPU, but GPU is not responding well. So how do I supposed to do that thing? I am stuck at there. So when I stuck at there, I get hang and freeze like that. Okay, yeah. So what exactly is this thing? How do I supposed to fix that? Well, I have to be add multiple. I have to kind of like assembly write a code in a such a way that if okay, yeah, if I went to store and the grocery store is a close, then I have to be come back and tell my mother that grocery store is closed. Like example, like basically in real life, as a user is actually giving me command that render this video, so try to export. So my job is to go to the GPU, but GPU is not functioning well, so I have to be give the command to the user that GPU is not working well. Okay, yeah, if the GPU is actually working, then export that video and show it to the user. Okay, but the GPU is not responding, then yeah. So what exactly is this thing? I actually add if and else statement. Okay, if this thing happened, then show it to the user that key the GPU is not working well. Okay, yeah. Or if the GPU is actually working well, then show the entire video, show the kind of like exported video. So this is the if and else statement. Okay, it's actually kind of like a coding language, by the way, and it can be easily fixed. Okay, it can be easily fixed by add this particular piece of line, and then the software will gonna kind of like run very smoothly. So what exactly happened when my software is actually broke? So this is what exactly happened. Then how the new version is kind of like solve that thing, because in the newest version they kind of like already added all those kind of like the problem that occurred in the previous version. They already fix it. They already add if and else statement in the coding language. Okay, yeah. So when they add if and else statement, they kind of like show it that yeah, this is the new version, download this version, and the kind of like most of the user download the new version, and they will not gonna face that much problem, right? So this is what it is. Okay, yeah, now you understand. Okay, yeah, just little bit understand now. Okay, yeah. So coding the software is a user interface. Okay, yeah, but the most of the kind of like a work is actually happen in the coding, almost like a 90% of the software is code. The 10% that you are seeing is a user interface, because as a normal user don't really understand the code and this black screen and stuff like that. But as a kind of like a developer, understand the kind of like assembly, what today is supposed to be show it to the user, and what kind of like a backend work is actually happened. Backend work is actually happened by the coding. All right, yeah. Now in the computer software, coding can be improved, can be kind of like it should supposed to be improved, it should supposed to be solved, it should supposed to be fix the problem. Okay, whatever the problem that they have, they kind of like fix the problem with the new codes and things like that. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like assembly code. Okay, yeah. Now you understand this thing, you understand the code. Okay, now let's talk about the DNA. Okay, yeah. DNA is a diboxic nucleic acid. Okay, yeah. It's a kind of like some building blocks of us, of human body. What do you mean by that? Okay, yeah. Let me give you real example. Okay, yeah. My father has a very thick beard. I also have very thick beard. My father has a kind of like a very like a very dense hair. Basically they have very dense hair. Basically at the age of 60, they didn't really get any kind of like a hair fall or things like that. They don't really get any kind of like a baldness. same thing for me. My age is not really that 60, but kind of like my hair growth is really rapidly. Like basically I have to be cut my hair every single month, and my hair growth is really rapidly, like every third day I have to be trim my beard and things like that. Okay, so it is very okay. Yeah. Now basically is this thing, my father is a very calm person, and I also somewhat very calm person too. Okay, yeah. Sorry, is it recording? Yeah, by the way, I just took a lot of pause. Like my father is actually called me, and I have to do some sort of work, so I went there. And yeah, all right, so where was I? Okay, I was actually talking about the DNA. Yeah, I'm talking about the DNA. Yes. Okay, so what is actually DNA? Okay, yeah. Okay, I just completely lost the question. The fuck, what is actually the question? Oh, the question is that what if the DNA could be rewritten in computer code? Okay, yeah. And I already talk about the computer code. Now let's talk about the DNA. Alright, yeah. So what is actually DNA and things like that? Alright. DNA means diboxyric nucleic acid. Okay, yeah. It's a kind of like a simply building block. Okay, let me kind of like simply give you as simple as example as it is. Okay, yeah. And by the way, these are very like basically, let me tell you one thing. Okay, my father has a very thick beard. I also have very thick beard too. Okay, yeah. I have to be trimmed every third day. My father has a very dense hair. I do have very dense hair too. Okay, yeah. My mother likes sweet. I also like the sweet too. Okay. My mother is bit more fair than my father. Okay. My father is a kind of like a somewhat little bit brown and black. My mother is a kind of like a simply white and kind of like a simply, like basically my mother is bit more fair, bit more kind of like a simply. I'm talking about the color of my mother is bit more fair, and my father's skin tone is bit more dark. Okay, yeah. Mixture of those, I am became little bit of kind of like a some mixture of fair and a kind of like a dark tone. I'm kind of like a saura. Like basically my color tone is a saura. I'm not really sure what is the English word for that, but my color tone is a saura. Okay, yeah. uh my father is a very calm person, and I also very calm person too. Okay, my mother is very impulsive, but I am not that impulsive. um so how is this actually happened? What exactly is this thing? Okay, so let me give you the understanding, okay, regarding about the how the kind of like a simply things happen, like how did I kind of like really born. Okay, I'm not really sure, but I'm trying to predict as much as possible as it could. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, when kind of like a simply male sperm is actually kind of like a inject into the ovary. Okay, yeah. And how this thing actually happened because of the reproduction. Okay, and I'm not gonna talk about the reproduction. Like if you wanted to know, you just search about porn and kind of like a watch bunch of video. That is called reproduction. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing that the kind of like a simply the sperm is kind of like a get inside the ovary. Okay, yeah. Now, okay, let me give you kind of like a okay, yeah. So when the penis is actually enter into the vagina, then basically the sperm is actually ejaculated. When the sperm is actually ejaculated, there are almost like a millions of sperm is actually ejaculated. Now, what is exactly that? If I'm gonna say millions of sperm means what? Like basically is this thing na, if you just see the sperm is kind of like a look like white, kind of like a whitish liquid and things like that. But these are whitish liquid from our naked eyes. But if you look at into the microscopic level, you actually seen there's a kind of like a tiny microorganism that is called sperm. Okay, yeah. And these are kind of like a some mixture of millions of sperm. Like basically in one kind of like a some ejaculation, we actually ejaculate millions of sperm. Okay, now what is actually that sperm? Okay, in that particular sperm is has the information about you. Okay, what is exactly that? Okay, okay. So let me give you the context. Okay, so basically, when the ejaculation happened, the sperm, the millions of sperm is kind of like assembly doing the race to get into the ovary. Okay, they have only one job to do, is that he get inside the ovary. Okay, now how is this thing? What is exactly that? Okay, so let me tell you one thing. The each sperm, like by the way, there are millions of sperm by the way, but each sperm has its different from each other. Okay, how it is different from each other? Okay, um okay, so it's a very hard to explain this thing. Also, I am not really sure about the information, because the information that I watch on YouTube videos, I watch a lot of kind of like informative YouTube videos, so that's why I'm kind of like a learn all those things. So yeah, okay, so what is actually that? Okay, so basically is this thing when the sperm is actually ejaculated to the vagina. Okay, then the millions of sperm has only one job to do to get into the ovary. Okay, one thing. Another thing is that this is the kind of like a process that only one sperm is kind of like achieve that thing. Rest of the sperm will gonna die into that particular process. What do you mean by that? Like, yeah, like basically this thing, it's a kind of like simply a race. Okay, like basically there is a millions of people who is kind of like a simply race against each other to be a winner. And basically this thing, there is no first and second place, so there is no second and third place, there is only one place, just a winner, that's it. And rest of the people will gonna die. This is what exactly happened. Like basically when the sperm is actually ejaculated, the race is actually started from the millions of sperm into the ovary. Okay, and they have kind of like doing the race and things like that. Okay, and only one sperm get into the ovary. Now why does rest of the sperm will not get into the ovary? Well, is because of that key, the rest of the sperm is not adequate or not kind of like a something strong enough to win that race. Let me tell you one thing. Our nature system is only choose such a species who can be stronger, better, and kind of like a somebody stronger and better. Okay, that's why it's nature choose. It's a kind of like a somebody, the way the nature is kind of like a somebody they make us. Okay, they only choose a kind of like a stronger sperm. Okay, now that stronger sperm who kind of like get into the ovary, and ovary lock itself, the rest of the sperm will gonna die into that vagina, and they will kind of like simply release from the urine and things like that. Okay, get it? Okay, and now understand. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, as I mentioned, nature choose only strong sperm. Okay, means like the sperm, that particular one sperm is kind of like a win the race, considered as the strong sperm, and only that sperm is actually allowed get into the ovary. Now this is a very amazing thing happened. Like this is what kind of like something evolved. Like this is what kind of like something, this process is kind of like nature, and it's not actually happened with us. It's actually happened with the every species, every animal, everything. Okay, like basically every animal is kind of like something equipped with the knowledge of the previous generation, and this is what actually happened because of this race, right? As I mentioned, so actually science, or sorry, nature is actually choose a stronger sperm to get into the ovary. Okay, now what is actually mean of that? What is that is a stronger? Why I'm actually saying a stronger? A stronger means stronger than rest of the sperm, right? Yeah, but uh how how is this thing? Is because of the information that they have. Okay, and what kind of like information? Information means like that ki a male information. Okay, like basically if I kind of like somebody had a sex with someone else, I like basically is this thing not sex with someone, like basically basically I married and kind of like things happen, and then I kind of like do this when I ejaculated. That one basically is this thing, the my sperm will kind of like the millions of sperm is kind of like will try to win that particular race and get into the get inside that ovary. Okay, now the person, that particular sperm is actually get inside that ovary, is stronger, and that stronger sperm is kind of like a backed by the information. What kind of like information about me, information about like basically what is actually my skin tone, what is actually my nature, what is actually the am I impulsive or not, do I like sweet or do I like sour, uh, am I kind of like tense or what, am I kind of like a healthy or what, am I kind of like basically this is the entire information. It's a kind of like somebody is this thing. Now what is actually happened, the male information is actually trapped inside that sperm. Okay, yeah, that is called the information. Okay, yeah, and this information is actually get like this information is actually inside the DNA. Okay, yeah, by the way, you probably seen that particular DNA in every kind of like a video scientific thing, like basically a spiral stuff. Okay, yeah, a kind of like a some that spiral stuff connected with a strand. That strand has the information regarding about what exactly you are. Okay, yeah, what kind of like a color that you have, what kind of like a something the like everything, everything, like it just everything. Okay, yeah. Now basically this is a kind of like some information of the male sperm. Okay, now ovary is actually kind of like a female organ. Okay, yeah, and female organ, it comes with, it also add the female information into the sperm too. Okay, so basically what is actually happened, the sperm is actually enter, I'm not really sure regarding about how the entire thing is actually happened, but what I'm trying to tell you, the whatever the information is actually inside that sperm when it get into the ovary, ovaries also give little bit information regarding from mother. Am I right or not? I'm not really sure about that thing, but it's a kind of like a let's just say that let's just imagine a blender. Okay, yeah, you kind of like a put the blue stuff and green stuff. Okay, yeah, and kind of like a turn on the blender. When you turn on the blender, it kind of like a mix blue and green. Okay, this is what exactly happened over there. The information from the male and information from the female is actually blend, and when it blend, it kind of like a begin as a kind of like a simply a what is actually that word, embryo, is it embryo? Probably the embryo, I'm not really sure about, I don't know what is scientific name for that. Okay, so this is what kind of like the embryo and things like that. Okay, yeah. Still the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right, because okay, yeah, because it's my thought process, I'm not really sure about that stuff. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is what it is. Okay, yeah, and then kind of like that embryo became kind of like a grown up, it became kind of like a something like the baby, and then that baby will gonna born and things like that. Okay, yeah, so basically is this thing, whatever the information that bake inside that ovary, that particular baby is actually born with that in particular information. Okay, yeah, so that means that baby will have kind of like some entire information regarding about father, entire information regarding about mother. Okay, yeah, but still I'm not really sure, but some of the things is kind of like a different. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah, my father is a very kind of like a talk very loudly. Okay, yeah, I am not. So basically I didn't really take that thing. My mother is a very impulsive, but I am not. So basically I didn't really take that thing too. Okay, yeah, so basically what I'm trying to tell you, I'm not really sure that the entire information is actually transfer, or kind of like some information transfer, or some information is actually, but like basically is this thing. Now what I know regarding about stuff. Okay, yeah, basically is this thing, the entire information already kind of like a transfer from father to son, from the DNA format. But the point is that those information is kind of like a muted, or kind of like a, or not active. Okay, yeah, like basically is this thing, my mother is a impulsive and I am not. Okay, yeah, so basically the impulsive strand in the DNA is not active, so that's why I'm not really that much impulsive. Okay, yeah, instead of I choose to be my father's calmness. Okay, yeah, so basically I active the calmness strand, so that's why I'm bitterly calm. Okay, yeah, so this is what kind of like some of the information, sometimes some we choose some sort of information, we choose not to information, and I'm not really sure who actually choose that particular information, things like that. I don't know about that particular stuff. Okay, yeah, so, and this is kind of like information that we actually kind of like came from, and then we became that particular person. Okay, yeah, one thing. Another thing is that it's not entirely depend upon the information that we have. It's not entirely depend upon the what kind of like information that we baked in. Sometimes we actually kind of like, even if whatever the information that we are actually baked in, but when we born and whatever the surrounding that we get, our influence is actually kind of like a something built towards that. Example, let's just say that ki my parents are actually from England. Okay, yeah, and they kind of like somebody had a baby, and they kind of like somebody give the baby, like basically give the baby means like basically what will happen that ki, like basically my parents from the England. Okay, yeah, they had a baby like, and basically the baby is actually kind of like a came to the India in some certain situation, whatever it is. Okay, yeah, now basically that baby is actually came to the India, so that baby kind of like a look like a kind of like a somebody little bit of foreigner or kind of like a somebody English people. Okay, yeah, but the way that baby will gonna talk, the baby will gonna talk as an Indian language, as a Hindi or Marathi or things like that. But how this actually happened? Okay, like their parents didn't really know any Hindi or Marathi language, then how does babies actually kind of like a somebody learn that thing? Is because of the influence. So let me tell you one thing, the 40% is a kind of like a somebody the information that person actually born with, and 60% is actually came with the whatever the influence that they get, whatever the information that they get from the beginning to born and things like that. Okay, yeah, it's surrounding influence. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is what it is. Now you understand coding, you understand kind of like a basic DNA structure. By the way, still the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right. I am kind of like, it's an artifact. It's kind of like I'm trying to explain as possible, as kind of like as better, as kind of like a, like basically is this thing that I am not a scientist, I am not kind of like expert, I'm not nothing really at all. I'm just curious about that particular stuff and I'm trying to elaborate that stuff. That's it. All right. Yeah. Now we understand the computer coding and we understand the kind of like a something the DNA and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now let's kind of like a simply understand regarding about editing. Okay, yeah, genome editing or like a wait, what is that? The genome editing actually mentioned in the question? No, the rewritten. They actually mention as a rewritten, like a computer code. Okay, yeah, they actually rewritten. Okay, so what is actually rewritten? A rewritten is a kind of like a somebody is this thing that key. Okay, yeah. So as I mentioned, okay, like basically as I mentioned that key, some of our strand in DNA is not active or things like that. Okay, yeah. What if we could kind of like active that DNA? We could active that particular strand or things like that. We might become invincible. What do you mean by that? Okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, let's just say that ki, what if my DNA is actually mixed with a kind of like a somebody DNA from tiger? Okay, yeah. So does it really match? No, it will not gonna match. But what if we kind of like a match particular some sort of sequence, like basically the strength from the tiger, okay, or speed from the tiger, or maybe kind of like a somebody my DNA is kind of like a somebody attached with a bird and things like that. Let's just say eagle. So basically, is this saying it kind of like a somebody attach the vision, the way that eagle is actually see the world and things like that. So basically, it kind of like a try to attach that strand into my DNA. So I would kind of like a somebody uh, see the things as a eagle can see or stuff like that. May I able to do that? No, I can't able to do that. By the way, we can do that, but we don't really have like a basically. Okay, let me give you. Okay, yeah, kind of like a some particular reality check. Okay, yeah, we can do that, and the study of this particular stuff called as a genetic editing. Okay, or genome sequence or gene editing. Okay, yeah. What is actually gene editing? A gene editing means like that ki we mess up as a human, we actually mess up with the DNA to kind of like a create a very better species regarding about everything. Okay, yeah. But we don't really do that often, or we don't really do that kind of like a somebody every animal. We only do that some certain species which kind of like a effectless or things like that. Okay, so okay, what is actually, first of all, what is actually this editing? What is actually this genetic editing? A genetic editing means like that it's kind of like a, something same. Okay, yeah. In the kind of like a, when we born, in the ovary, some of the kind of like information actually muted, some of the information is active, some of the information is not active. Okay, yeah. And this is all actually happen with the nature point of perspective as a kind of like a naturally. Okay, yeah. But what if we could kind of like a change that thing? What if we could control that thing? What if we could control the how do we supposed to connect the each strand of DNA to which strand, and kind of like a somebody create a such a species which would be kind of like a stronger, better, and everything, like artificial baby or things like that. So if we do that thing, what will gonna world will look like basically everyone will be stronger, smarter, and things like that, right? So the world will be kind of like a really great, right? No, that is, it does not work like that way. Let me tell you one thing. If I'm gonna say that if the everyone became smarter, if the everyone became stronger, if the everyone became kind of like a better version of themselves, then probably we will gonna kind of like a simply arrive in such a world where kind of like a simply the it's really chaos will gonna happen. Literally everyone will gonna chaos and things like that. Because let me tell you one thing now. Okay, the growth is actually happen is because of we are different from each other. Like basically I am different from each other, you are different from each other. How is this thing actually happen? Like how is that? Okay, yeah. Let me give you the context. Okay, yeah. So let's just say that ki how do I supposed to say? Okay, yeah. We actually fail at something. Okay, like basically when I kind of like make a design. Okay, yeah. Sometimes I didn't really like the design the way I created. Okay, yeah. And I fail. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a failure happened, and I kind of like a try to fix that thing. Okay, yeah. Let me give you the little bit understanding. Okay, so basically couple of year ago I was kind of like a somebody doing as a gaming content creation. Okay, yeah. I thought that gaming content creation would be really good, really easy to make and stuff like that. But when I try to do that thing, it's not gonna happen. Okay, yeah. So I fail. Okay, and because of the fail, I realized that it's not really good for me to kind of like make the content creation, gaming content creation. So I change my perspective from gaming to kind of like a some way that I really love it as a photography, as a kind of like a things, and then suddenly started slightly change it to the graphic designing, things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, sometimes now failure is a somewhat very essential factor for our growth. Because of that we don't know what is actually right. We thought that it was right, but it was kind of like something wrong. Okay, yeah. And this is what exactly happened in I still not like basically I think that now I'm kind of like talking about a lot of kind of like stuff that might not kind of like right. Okay, yeah. Because I think that na ki dude, I should supposed to be end here because I'm kind of I think that now I'm kind of like talking some sort of not bluff but kind of like somebody just a topic that is not actually connect with the question. The question is actually mentioned that ki what would be happen when we edit the genome sequence and things that we would become kind of like a very such a species would be really much better in everything, but that is not good. Okay, because the growth like it is not good, yeah, it is not good. Okay, I do have explanation. I wanted to talk about that explanation, but I will not going to talk about that explanation right now because I think I'm not capable person to kind of like tell you, because I'm gonna give you kind of like somebody a very vague explanation. That vague explanation is kind of like somebody really not right. Okay, because let me tell you one thing. Sometimes na information is should supposed to be right. If that not right, then probably that information would be disaster for somebody, because I don't know who is actually listening or something like that. But let's just say if you are kind of like a listening this thing, I'm gonna try to tell you I am not a kind of like expert person. I'm nothing really at all. I'm just really curious about this thing, and yeah. So basically the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right. Definitely not. So do not trust me about this in entire every artifact episode. That's why it's called artifact episode. It's a kind of like a raw thought process to kind of like a share and things like that. It's not meant to be exactly right. Okay, yeah. So this is what it is, and because of this question I'm kind of like a try to talk about a lot of kind of like a stuff that I think I might not correct. So probably I should supposed to be warned not only to the user but as also for myself, because it's not like thing. Okay, genetic sequence and genome editing is a kind of like something really cool thing to kind of like a look at this point of perspective, but as an advantage and disadvantage and things might be kind of like something very crazy and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. I will gonna mention lot of stuff, but I don't really have back by this information and things like that. So I should supposed to be stop myself to not to kind of like a talk about such a thing that is I'm not really aware of that probably. So yeah, so I should supposed to be end here. This end, and also I'm really tired to talk right now. It's been almost like a 44 minute. Thank you.